Hello, my name's Dr. Stephen Walker. I'm here tonight to talk a little bit about, mental health and how things affect the way we think and feel. So the first thing I wanted to talk about briefly was the idea that talking about what's in our mind, talking about what's in our thoughts is a negative thing in our society. And I just want to talk, touch briefly on why I think this mental health stigma is responsible for what we see, the kind of carnage we see in our society every day. I mean, if you look at what happened in Oregon recently, it's clear that people are out there and people are suffering and they're really not getting the kind of help that they need. And this is confounding to a lot of us in the field because most of us have colleagues who are doctors or medical professionals, and clearly going to see your physical doctor is an accepted part of our society, but yet talking about what's in your thought in your mind seems to still have this idea that there's a stigma associated with it. So let's talk briefly a little bit about that. Why is that? Why is it that if I want to talk about something that's on my mind or something that's in my head, there's something negative associated with that? Well, from my vantage point, the reason a lot of that happens is because we associate our thoughts and emotions with something negative, with weakness, with something we don't want to talk about. We don't want other people to know that we're struggling, or we don't want other people to know that we have these issues that, and again, one of the things I like to ask a lot of my clients or my new clients is, who do you know that doesn't have issues? I mean, who do you know out there that friends, family, colleagues, anybody who doesn't have issues, who doesn't have something from their past that's affecting them or keeping them from hitting their potential or finding a mate or getting a promotion in a job? So this is something I think we all need to really look at clearly, because the idea that mental health has any kind of stigma to it really needs to be looked at, because what are we stigmatizing? We're stigmatizing the way we think and feel, and in turn, that's causing us to see people going into schools, people going into grocery stores, wherever it may be, and acting out all their repressed, violent, or negative thoughts onto the world around them. And something needs to stop. I mean, something needs to intervene there. And I think it's really incumbent upon everybody to really stop and ask themselves, what part of my thinking and feelings isn't being dealt with? What fear or what pain do I have from my past that is causing me to not feel as though I can find a mate or find happiness or have a fulfilled marriage or be able to feel good about myself? And this stigma that is associated with talking to somebody like me, who's a psychologist, once you really stop and think about it, is why? Why is that? Why do we allow this idea that if I'm depressed, if I'm anxious, if I'm not feeling good about myself, if I'm insecure, if I doubt myself, if I feel ugly, fat, whatever it may be, why is that something I'm not dealing with? Why is that something that I'm not actively working on? And what I found is most people try to self-medicate, self-heal themselves. And while I think that's effective, I think the reason a lot of people who read a lot of self-help books or go to seminars or do something where they're reading about some kind of disease they may have or mental illness is because they're not actually talking out what they're feeling. They're not actually going through the process of talking things out. I don't need to convince anybody that language is a very powerful thing. I mean, if we look at people who have walked on the planet, like the Martin Luther Kings or the Gandhis or Jesus's, Mohammed's, whoever it may be, they preached a message, and that message was heard. They encouraged their followers to confess, to talk out what they were feeling. But yet, in our society, we keep it in. We read a book. We think that that's going to give us what we need as far as the change we're looking for. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That's a good start, to read and to feel as though you're working on yourself. But the problem is those thoughts just basically stay reverberating in your head, and they don't actually have a way of being talked out and then processed with somebody who is well trained and who can help you deepen that experience you're feeling and go into a place where you need to go with how you're feeling. I mean, if you really stop and think about it, if you're married and you're angry at your husband or your wife and you don't talk to them about it, how's the marriage going to go if you keep that in? But see, we seem to do that with how we're thinking and feeling. We don't want to show that weakness, and yet that's the reason we have the kind of society we have, where we either medicate with shopping, alcohol, drugs, or whatever it may be, and we don't actually get into the deeper aspects of who we are. And again, that boils down to this idea that there's a stigma with talking about what you're thinking and feeling, as opposed to actually keeping it inside of you and letting it fester into all these kinds of emotional wounds. So one of the main things I've seen that affects people is fear. And that's what the topic of tonight's webinar is fear, and how fear affects our ability to get what we want out of the world, get what we want out of our relationships. So if you really stop and think about, somebody once broke down fear into false evidence appearing real, FEAR, false evidence appearing real. And that's a great way to kind of look at fear, because when we're afraid of something, we have this idea that we're psychic, that we know that what we're afraid of is going to come true. So, you know, back in my single days, I'm not single anymore. Maybe I was afraid of going and approaching somebody I saw somewhere and I wanted to meet her, or maybe I was afraid of talking to my boss, or maybe I was afraid to say something to somebody that was on my mind. Let's think about that for a second. Let's take the boss. I'm afraid to go talk to my boss about a raise or something. What do I immediately start thinking in my mind? Well, what I start thinking of, he's not going to be happy, or she's going to tell me I'm not worthy of the money, or I'm not entitled to get what I want out of my job because maybe I doubt my own ability. That's how fear begins to interact with how we're thinking and feeling. But what a lot of people don't really understand yet is that their fears are coming out of their conditioning. So what's conditioning? Conditioning is what we learn, how we're raised. So maybe we got raised in a family where people didn't talk about their issues. They didn't work on what they were thinking and feeling. So in turn, what they do is they keep that in. They repress that. They don't talk that out because maybe in their family, somewhere down, 20, 30 years ago, they got yelled at for saying what was on their mind, or they got shot down, or somebody said, you know what, I don't think you deserve this. So now that gets embedded in our thinking, and that becomes what are known as conditioned beliefs. Now, what's a belief? Sure, we all believe in something. Believe in God, believe in money, believe in love, whatever it may be. I'm talking about how a belief gets formed inside of us. So the majority of what I try to help my clients work on is based in cognitive behavioral psychology. Now, maybe you've heard of it, I don't know, but I'll go through a quick, just kind of a Reader's Digest approach to condensing it. So cognitive behavioral psychology talks about our cognitions, our thinking, what's in my head affects my behavior, cognitive behavioral. What I think affects how I behave. So take, for example, what I do for a living. If I wake up in the morning and I think, oh man, I got to go talk to people all day, I got to listen to their problems, I got to deal with this or that, odds are, A, I'm probably not going to be successful and effective what I do, and B, I'm probably not going to do it for too long, or C, I'm not going to schedule that many people. And anybody that works with me knows, I'm very energetic and passionate about what I do, and I truly love trying to help good people not suffer. So that's an example of how cognitions work. If I hate my job, if I don't like what I'm doing, that's going to affect my behavior, which then in turn is going to affect what I do and how I do it. So cognitive behavioral psychology helps a client, helps somebody begin to look at how their cognitions are affecting their behavior. So how that happens in cognitive behavioral psychology is you have the ABCs of thinking. And how the ABCs of thinking work real simply is A stands for activating event, B stands for belief, and C stands for consequence. And how that works is something activates us. We start believing something about the activating event, and those beliefs have consequences in the form of feelings. So we get an activating event, We believe something about it, and then there's a consequence of those beliefs in the form of feelings. So take, for example, this no hair growing thing on my scalp. Believe it or not, I used to have a beautiful full head of hair that I loved dearly, and it started going back in my early 20s, and it was curly and it was great and I loved it, believe it or not. So, activating event. Stephen Walker starts losing his hair. What does he start believing about losing his hair? Well, I'm heterosexual, so I start believing no woman's gonna ever like me. I can't deal with this. This is the end of the world. I hate this. I don't want to deal with this anymore. And by the way, feel free to jump in with any questions you have at any point. I'm going to go ahead and just turn on the chat icon. So whoever wants to ask a question, feel free. So I start believing all these things about myself, and then in turn, I start feeling bad about myself. So there's ABCs. I start losing my hair. I start believing something about losing my hair, and those beliefs have consequences in the form of depression, low self-esteem, and me staying home a lot on weekends. So, believe it or not, true. So, what's your ABC? What's something that's happened to you? Maybe an activating event is your husband or wife gets angry at you. Maybe your boss yells at you. Maybe your mom or dad says something to you that you don't like. What do you start believing about that? And then once you believe something about the activating event, those consequences, the C of that, ABC, the consequence of that is, how do you start feeling? You start doubting yourself. You start believing that something about you is wrong, that you're not doing something right. And that there's an effect of that, and that effect usually is that, hey, I'm feeling bad. So one of the things about fear is almost, of course, we all have fear. I mean, fear is what basically kept us from, not succeeding as a species. If we weren't afraid, we probably would have heard something in the jungle and we would have just said, oh, whatever, and gone out and we would have been eaten. So fear is a protective mechanism. We can't stigmatize fear, because if we stigmatize fear, then we're looking at not having the ability to know when we're going to get hurt or not. So fear in of itself is not a negative thing. How fear affects us is a negative thing, because how fear usually affects us is, what do we start believing? We start thinking, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to do this. And fear has a way of then beginning to repress our basic desires for companionship, success, and all kinds of different things when you stop and think about it. So while you're listening to this, I want you to just think about a little bit, how does fear affect you? How does fear affect your ability to feel good about yourself, to not be able to succeed in what you want to do? And, I do want this to be kind of interactive. I think we're having some issue with the server, because we had many people who were going to come, but apparently I think I'm only seeing one person, which is fine. One person or 100 is not an issue. But think about how fear affects you. How do you react to fear? One of the things I've seen with, and again, feel free to ask any question anytime. One of the things I've seen with fear is, like I talked about before, is we begin to psychically tell ourselves that's going to happen. So take, for example, maybe you are planning, you want to move somewhere. What does the fear start telling you? Oh, I'm never going to do that. It's never going to happen. Suppose the car breaks down along the way and something happens, or suppose I get to where I'm going and things don't work out. Then we start imagining, oh yeah, and then I'm not going to have money to pay my mortgage, or my boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife is gonna leave me. Fear starts affecting aspects of the way we think very insidiously, because then the fear begins convincing us that that is a reality, that is definitely going to happen. So we begin allowing the fear, or remember, false evidence appearing real, FEAR, false evidence appearing real. So what starts appearing, what's the false evidence that appears real in that example? Well, we're convinced we move or we go do something and we're never going to get it. We're not going to find a job. We're not going to find an apartment. We're not going to find this. That's how fear affects us. So one of the best ways to affect how fear affects us is a Buddhist, I'm not Buddhist, but a Buddhist technique called mindfulness. And mindfulness is all the rage these days. Everyone's talking about mindfulness, mindfulness, mindfulness. So mindfulness is basically just thinking about your thinking, being aware of what you're thinking about. And how that basically works is something happens to us and we need to become aware of what we're thinking about. We need to literally think about our thinking. So using racism as an example of how conditioning works, and I'll tie all this in a second, but let's look at racism, for example. And we all have prejudices. I mean, you know, we all have things or beliefs we have about men, women, black people, white people, the whole night, Arab, Mexican, whatever it may be. We all have prejudices. But if you really stop and think about it, no one's born prejudiced. No one. Where are the prejudiced babies? Where are the little kids who look at someone else and say, "Oh no, 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 I'm better than," or "I'm worse"? That's pure conditioning. It's racism is a purely conditioned state of awareness. Now, somebody might say, "Well, wait a minute. Kids can see that you're black, I'm white, you're Mexican, you're Spanish, you're Korean, you're this." Sure, we see differences. Absolutely, the kids see differences. They make distinctions about whether that person's attractive or not attractive. Absolutely, but you know what they don't see? They don't see superiority. They don't see inferiority. You'll never see a kid look at another kid, black, white, whatever, and say, "I'm better than him," or "I'm not as good as them," until they learn that. That is a learned response to racism. Okay? No one is born racist. I'm sorry, I don't care who wants to tell you that. Nobody is born a racist. And guess what else no one's born? No one is born afraid to chase after what they want. No one's born like that. Somewhere along the way, we got conditioned by looking at our parents, or maybe somebody at an early age told us, "Oh, you'll never, wow, no one likes you. Why would you get what you want?" No, that's how we get our fears conditioned into us. We learn at an early age what is happening around us, begins making us have these internal states of mind and these internal beliefs that then tell us, you know what, I'm not worthy of finding my wife. I'm not worthy of finding my husband. I'm not worthy of getting a raise at a job. That person will never like me. And that's how fear affects the way we think. We get conditioned into different stages of fear. And one of the main fears I've seen people struggle with is a fear of failure, being afraid to fail. Now, if you really stop and think about what failure is, you have to stop and ask yourself, what is your belief about failure? What do you believe failure is? I mean, what does the idea of failure stir up in you? Does it stir up in you, "I'm a failure"? Does it stir up in you, "I'll never be able to do this"? Does it stir up in you, "Oh, I don't even want to go there because if I go there, I'm going to feel horrible about myself and I'm never going to be able to feel good"? Is that what it stirs up in you? Well, that's something that needs to be looked at. You need to look at why you believe what you believe, because if you don't look at why you believe what you believe, we're basically just playing out this conditioning that we've had our whole lives. I mean, again, look at racism. If no one questions why they hate this green person, you're going to just keep hating green people because somewhere along the way, someone told you all green people are no good, that green people can't be trusted. So we just play that out every time a green person comes around us. "Oh, there's a green person. Why am I?" And then guess what happens? We never make any changes until, if you apply the idea of mindfulness, why am I hating this green person? Well, what's this green person done to me? I mean, where did I learn to hate this green person? Is it okay with me that I hate this green person? That's how mindfulness works. That's why there's so many books and there's so much online, and people are writing all about this mindfulness, because mindfulness, being aware of what we're thinking about, is the beginning of change. Now, the problem, again, with just reading about this is you're not able to talk out what you're thinking and feeling. You're not able to talk out what's inside of you and get effective feedback on it, reprocess it, rework it, and reframe it, and then begin to apply that in your world, because those ideas are just kind of rumbling around in your head, and they're here and they're there, and I don't know what's going on, and all of that. So what I encourage a lot of my clients to do is in our sessions is literally to just take notes and just to write down things that strike them in our session, and then begin to either text me later or email me later and get into that more and more. So a lot of what I try to work with my clients on, and I work with clients not only here locally in Tampa. I've got 3 offices here in Tampa, and we are packed to the, I mean, I literally, we could see 50, 60 people a week if we had the staff to do it. But I work with people all over the world. I do video seminars like this. I do one-on-one coaching seminars or sessions with people. But what talking things out will help you do is begin to hear how you think. Hear what's going on inside of you. And that's a very powerful thing, because when you begin hearing what you're saying, you begin disputing and questioning that. It's like if you and your husband or wife or boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever it may be, when you start talking things out, oh, I didn't know that you a personal example from my own life. We had an incident just last night with one of our neighbors, and I had gone over to ask about why their dog was barking so much, and the lady had a very negative reaction to what I said. So then after I came home and I talked to her husband, then it came out that her mother just died. Did I know that? Until she talked it out, and now everything's fine and we're able to calm down and everyone's back to feeling good. But this is the power of talking things out, is people don't seem to give enough credence to the idea that we have to talk our problems out. If we don't talk our problems out with somebody, they just fester. They just stew around, and people say, well, I talked to my friend, or I talked to this person, and yeah, the problem with that is when you're talking to a friend or somebody you're emotionally connected to, what's the first thing they're going to do? What's the first thing they're going to do? They're going to support what you're saying. They're going to not only, I don't mean not support it like I wouldn't support it, but they're going to basically say to you things like, oh yeah, you're right. You're right. They shouldn't have done that. Like if I got into an argument with my wife and I call my mom or my brother or somebody, yes, we do, believe it or not. I do once in a while have arguments with my wife. I'm a human. But they're going to tell me what I want to hear. And that's the problem with venting to friends and family. I was working with a couple today, very nice couple. And as we're working on it, it came out that what are they doing when they get in an argument? Each one is going to their respective family members and saying what about the person? So what do you think is going to happen the next time you see that the mother-in-law sees the husband, or the mother-in-law sees the wife? What do you think is going to happen? You think it's going to be positive? You think they're going to just magically be able to put that aside and say, whatever? Of course not. They're going to have those kinds of feelings inside of them. That's why I recommend to anybody in any kind of negative relationship, do not vent to your friends and family. That's one of the biggest mistakes we can make, because the minute you start venting to your friends and family, they're going to support you. And you know what they're going to do? Because they love you or care about you, they're going to try to rescue you. They're going to try to make you feel better. And one of the main things, obviously that's part of what I do, but one of the main things an effective person who does what I do is, because not only psychologists can do this, counselors or social workers, but is empathy, is feeling what another person's feeling. So when someone comes into my office and they're afraid of something, they have a fear, one of the main things we're going to work on is empathy. We're going to work on how they're feeling and how that fear is affecting their life. Because once we do that, we're going to be able to dissect that, go over that, look at that from multiple different angles, and we're going to be able to come up with an effective strategy for that. So again, if you have any questions, please feel free to throw them in. So when we're afraid of something, what do we start doing in our minds? So if I'm afraid of, let's say I was working with an athlete the other day who was struggling with the particular sport he's in. Let's just say it's baseball. It was actually baseball. But one of the things that he was working on is he's right now he's doubting his ability to play. So what do you think he visualizes? And this is actually what he was saying. He starts visualizing striking out. He starts visualizing himself in his rut. But see, this is what we all do too. When we're afraid of something, we are creating these visual images in our minds about what that failure is going to look like once we get to it. And one of the main destructive things about fear is that fear begins to convince us that it is definitely going to happen, that what we're afraid of is a likelihood. There is not even a chance that it won't happen. Or if there is a chance, it's drowned out by those beliefs that tell us, you know what? No, not going to happen. Not going to happen. If I lose my hair, I'm never going to meet another woman again. I'm never going to, or if I lose my job. I was working with a gentleman today who's trying to make a decision about what kind of work. Should he leave his job and go get another job? And he's experiencing a lot of fear based around the idea that he's afraid he's going to make the wrong decision. And this is another aspect of fear, is we become afraid that what we're going to do is the wrong choice. So my wife and I relocated to Florida from Oregon. So in moving to Oregon, in moving from Oregon to Florida, we encountered many challenges along the way. I was hired by the Department of Corrections here to manage one of their mental health facilities. I was interviewed 3 times. They were told me, "Oh, Dr. Walker, we're so excited to have you." My first day there, so they knew we were buying a house a few miles away from the prison. First day there, "Hey, did you hear we're closing?" "Excuse me? I'm sorry, what?" Yeah, the prison's closing, and you're going to be transferred to another prison an hour and a half away from here." No mention of that in any of the interviews. So clearly threw us for a loop. I decided that if that was how they, treat their employees, that's probably not a good environment for me, because that's not going to help me. So I decided that I wasn't going to take the transfer. And then guess what? Unemployed. So now I'm living in Florida. I leave Portland, Oregon. I had a beautiful, thriving private practice. We moved here because my father passed away and my mom lives about an hour and a half away from us. Now I'm unemployed. Imagine the fear at that point. So I'm unemployed. I'm not licensed in Florida yet because I have transferring and all this. So I have to retake the licensing exam. What kind of fear do you think I'm feeling in that moment? I got my wife, who we weren't married at the time. She's wondering what's going on. You can imagine the fear. Oh my God, I'm never going to pass the licensing exam. I'm never going to be able to get my practice going like in Oregon. Why Oregon? Why did I come here? This was a mistake. It was a mistake. I hear this a lot from people. Oh, that was a mistake. And they're so afraid of making mistakes, as though making a mistake is the worst possible thing in the world that they could do. So clearly this is what I start doing. So what do I immediately do? Start getting depressed, start getting down. I'm not gonna lie to you. It's the truth. So what do? Thanks to my supportive wife, who also was helped there and supporting me emotionally and psychologically, I began getting myself back together. I began questioning the belief system I had about where I was at. I stopped beating myself up. I'm going to do another webinar on beating ourselves up and all that, our own worst enemy. But this one right now is about fear. So of course, I'm afraid. So I rallied. I get myself going. I start questioning my beliefs. I start having conversations with myself, like, "Come on, man, we can do this." Slowly, I start getting my momentum up. But what am I visualizing along the way? Oh, I'm never going to get a practice going. I'm never going to be able to get myself back together. This is a mortal blow. I'm never going to be able to feel as though I'm successful again. All the thoughts we were having, but along the way, I'm disputing them. I'm cutting them down. I'm chipping them down along the way, talking to myself through that. I'm going to do another seminar on self-talk and how powerful self-talk is. The idea that what I tell myself affects how I think and feel. So in time, bear down, started studying, passed the test. Now, okay, great, hooray, wonderful. Yeah, I remember the moment. What kicked in immediately? Let's hit the road. We got to get them. So what do I start doing? Immediately the fear hits me again. Oh my God, what if I can't get my offices going? What if I can't get clients? What if? And that's how fear plays on us. The what ifs. What if this doesn't work out? What if I can't do this? What if we have to sell the cars, get rid of the house? What if? That's how fear affects us. We start playing out in our mind as though I can psychically know, yeah, I'm never going to get any clients. So what was I talking about before? Visualization. What was I visualizing? Failure, problems. Started working that in my mind. Started visualizing myself having clients. Started visualizing people calling. Feeling as though I had a private practice. 6 months later, 3 offices, thriving practice. Now, what does that mean? Am I saying be like Mike, be like me? No, that's not what I'm saying. I am saying, Mike, by the way, is Michael Jordan. It's an old, anyway, that's a whole other story. But the process of what you're visualizing is going to affect how you feel. And one of the things fear works on is what you're visualizing. How are you visualizing success? Are you visualizing failure or are you visualizing success? And one of the things I hear all the time from people is that they visualize themselves failing. I was doing a video session tonight with a young lady who's struggling with med school. And she said she struggled so hard with these tests that she's visualizing herself failing. She knows she's going to fail. And one of the things we're working on is, again, becoming aware of how your conditioning is affecting how you feel. Conditioning is one of the most either destructive or productive ways that one of the most because it can be insidious. If my conditioning growing up was, Steve-O, you're not gonna succeed. Success is for somebody else, or I got shot down a lot, or my parents weren't supportive. Guess what I've got going on in my head? But see, the problem is that a lot of this can't be really done by yourself, because you can become aware of it, but you're not talking it out. You're not getting it out of you. Think of how a medical doctor heals a wound, cleans out the wound, disinfects it, lets the body heal it. A lot of that is the same thing with this type of work. Psychotherapy or therapy or whatever you call it, talking to another human being who's trained to do this, that's what I like to call it, is the latest study is that 75% of people who do this kind of work, 75% of people who do this work feel better after 3 months. 75% of people. And love him or hate him, President Obama has made mental health, getting mental health treatment on the same level as getting physical health. Now, why is that important? Up until Obamacare, which we won't get into that because I don't want to alienate people or say anything that I shouldn't, but up until the Affordable Health Care Plan, guess what? Mental health was never on the same, it's called parity, was never had the same equality as physical health. Now it does. If you have health coverage, you have built into your policy mental health benefits. And another thing that Obamacare has done, it has actually lowered the cost of treatment. Before, I don't want to say anything, but prices were way too high. Okay? Prices were way too high to get treatment. Now, reimbursement rates have come down and more people are getting the help, and more people are beginning to realize that there are trained people out there who can help them with how they're thinking and feeling. And what do I mean by training? I personally, 4 years of undergrad, 2.5 years of graduate school, and another 4 years to get my doctoral degree. And if you add up all those hours, those are tens of thousands of hours that most people in this field have had working with people. I myself have worked in prisons, different types of facilities, different types of clientele. I've worked with pedophiles, sex offenders, female sex offenders, rapists, gang members, depressed, unhappy, marital therapy, substance abuse, all kinds. These are the kinds of skills that we have that we can bring to bear on what you're struggling with. You shouldn't be struggling with fear. You shouldn't be struggling with worries and just suffering in silence, because I can tell you point blank, help is there. There is help out there. There are people that can help you that. But again, we get back to fear. What are we afraid of? Sorry, I'll stop shaving my hand so much. But what are we afraid of? We're afraid of how people think of us. We're afraid of how it's going to look. Oh, you see a therapist? You talk to someone about your problems? Oh my God. Oh my God, that's so horrible. It's so horrible that I am talking to somebody about how I feel, who's going to help me feel better, and then is going to help me feel better about being alive. That is so horrible. You know what? In fact, why don't we do this as a culture? Let's stop talking to each other about how we're thinking and feeling in general. Let's just keep it all inside and then see what we have. Look at this guy in Oregon, suffering silently, living alone, suffering, no girlfriend, nobody to love, no friends. So he builds up anger and resentment towards people. And guess who suffers? Innocent people being gunned down because this kid probably was ashamed to access help. Maybe you know vets, maybe you know people who are struggling. Exact same thing. People are afraid to show weakness. And this is so confounding to me. Again, the question I like to ask people is, name me one aspect of modern society, modern day life that we all see and experience. Name me one aspect of modern day life that is not affected by what's inside someone's head. Name me one. One thing that we experience on a daily basis that is not made up, that is not influenced by your psychology and what's in your mind. But we live in a culture that tells us, no, I have to be afraid. Be afraid to talk to people about how you feel. Be afraid to work on how you feel. And we're going to continue having these issues with people blowing people away and suicide. Suicide rate. Think about this for a second when you think about fear. The United States is an individualistic country, meaning that we pride ourselves on individualism, okay? We believe that, oh, you know, I don't need no help. I'm a self-made man. I don't need anybody. I'm an individual. Most, if not all other countries on this planet are collectivistic. Now, what does that mean? What's the difference between individualistic and collectivistic? In a collectivistic society, it's a village. Remember the old expression, it takes a village to raise a kid? It's a feeling like you're part of a whole. You're feeling connected to other people. You get your self-identity from the collection of people, okay? That's collectivism. Individualism is what's happening in our country. Now get this, think about this for a second, and you can look up all this up online. Guess what country has the highest rate of mental illness of all other countries? That's right. The United States of America. Do I hate the United States of America? Of course not. Of course not. I'm proud to be an American. But you know what I'm more proud to be? A human being. And we as this country need to look at how fear is affecting our getting help. Okay? So let's recap a little bit. Conditioning. We're conditioned to be afraid. Remember racism. No one's born racist. No one's born needing anti-anxiety medication or antidepressants. And we're going to have a whole nother seminar on antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications, okay? We're going to talk all about that. But nobody's born like that. So that's conditioning. We bring in mindfulness. Why am I hating this yellow person, green person? What's going on with that? Why am I sitting in this Burger King hating this black person, this white person? I don't know them. That's mindfulness. Thinking about your thinking. Mindfulness couples with self-talk. And then we begin talking ourselves either out of it or into it. But the problem is, again, we can't just do this on our own without a period of time where we talk things out, where we're able to process our thinking and feeling. Just being aware of it is the beginning, but you have to spend some time talking out what you're thinking and feeling. Visualization. What am I visualizing about what I'm afraid of? Am I visualizing that I'm never going to get what I want? I'm never going to have what I want? Well, guess what's going to happen? Every time I'm in a situation where I want what I want, those visual images are going to come crashing in on me, and I'm going to be feeling like, what's the point? What's the point? Visualization is a key part of being able to get past our fears and things holding us back. What do I believe about failure? Remember, we talked about this earlier. What does failure mean to me? What is my belief about failure? What do I believe failure to be? You know what a lot of people believe failure to be? I'm a friggin' failure. Excuse my language. I'm a failure. That's what people believe when they fail. Oh man, I'm such a failure. I'm never going to get what I want out of the world. Things are always going to hold me back. I'm never, yeah, I remember as a kid. That's what people start believing about failure. They're a failure. Let's look at, for instance, Thomas Edison. Who's he, you know? Who's Thomas Edison? Well, we all know who Thomas Edison is. He has a very famous quote where he says, I didn't fail 1,000 times. I learned 1,000 ways it didn't work. He was being interviewed for a newspaper article, and the reporter said, but Dr. Edison, you failed, let's say 100 times before you invented the light bulb. And remember, when Edison failed, there's no Home Depot, there's no let's order stuff from Amazon. This is starting from scratch failure. This means the experiment exploded. I got to start from scratch. I can't go buy something. I got to make everything I need. So you failed 100 times, Dr. Edison. Did you ever want to give up? And the story goes, he had this kind of like quizzical, curious look on his face, and he said, failed? I learned 1,000 ways it didn't work, son. And that's how that comes from, because that's the mentality that he had. He didn't look at failure as I'm a failure. He looked at failure as part of the process of success. And anybody who has been successful will say, my failures got me to where I'm at. My failures got me to where I'm at, myself included, because trust me, I got my shares of failure. But thankfully along the way, I learned certain techniques. And by the way, if you're wondering, yes, I went through a process of talking things out with somebody who helped me, excuse me, reframe what I was thinking and feeling to help me get some control about what's in my mind. Because that's another thing people are afraid of. They're afraid of what's up here. They're afraid of their thoughts and emotions. Why? Because they don't spend time thinking or talking them out. So they exist as these little things. Oh man, I'm so crazy. I don't know why I'm so crazy. I don't know why I think and feel the way I do. I don't know why. Find out why. Find out why. Don't give in to this fear, this stigma that there's something wrong with talking about how you're thinking and feeling. That is why and yes, look, gun control, we can have that debate. Is it gun control or mental illness? The reality of the situation is, whether you're a gun advocate or believe guns are all evil isn't really the issue. Who the heck is going to support, let's have the mentally ill have guns. Let's have somebody who's been incarcerated for a violent crime get access to guns. Let's do that. So obviously it makes sense to support some kind of gun control and some sort of measure, but that's not really what this is about. This is about mental illness. Mental illness is not something to be afraid of. If you're not ashamed of your other illnesses, you have a toothache, I'm ashamed, I have a toothache. No, you go to your dentist. You got a knee ache, you go check out your knee. It's the exact same thing with what's in our mind. There's no need to be afraid of what's in your mind anymore, because if we as a society continue being afraid of what's in our mind, if we let that fear, false evidence appearing real, if we let the false evidence stay that, oh man, people are going to judge me, which by the way is another fear people have, this fear of judgment, okay? We're afraid of being judged. So then what do? No, I can't talk to somebody. I can't. It's as if people don't want to heal. It's as if people believe that the best way to heal is just to leave it alone. Like imagine if I cut my arm right now and I get a cut here and I say, no, there's nothing there. It'll heal. And I start rubbing because we're afraid to get help. Imagine the dude in Oregon, the guy in Oregon who shot up the community college. Imagine a society where he's not afraid to reach out and say, hey, I'm really having some desperate thoughts here, man. I mean, look at Robin Williams. Look at Robin Williams, this genius intellectual, funny, makes people, millions of people loved him. What did he do? He killed himself. Why? I don't know. But my working hypothesis is there was something going on inside of him that he didn't want to talk about. It took a hold of him. It got him starting to thinking in that negative spiral, no hope, no way out. And here we are. Suicide is one of the most fearful topics you can have. Talk about, whatever. People are afraid to talk about thoughts and feelings like that. If you're thinking about that, if you're not somebody watching, but this will be on YouTube later, if you're thinking about hurting yourself because of something, some emotional pain you're feeling, and you don't get help or you don't talk about it, think of the pain that's going to inflict on people around you. Think of the fact that what you're thinking about is you have created it into such a calamity that it has consumed like a virus, like a sickness. It has consumed your thinking to the point where you're afraid to talk about it. Well, let me tell you something. There's nothing to be afraid. There's nothing to be ashamed of if you're thinking about killing yourself or hurting yourself. Everybody has had those thoughts at some point or another. Everybody. Everybody has gone through something in their life where they think, God, you know what, man? If I was dead, if I was dead, I wouldn't have to deal with any of this, man. Everybody has had that. But again, another fear. We're afraid to show weakness. We're afraid to show weakness, as though something's wrong with being weak, as though I'm the only person on the planet who has weakness. Imagine that for a second. So we're coming up on the end here. I want to, again, give anybody who's watching this the opportunity to ask a question. I know I have to figure out what happened with the server tonight, but if I do see, if there's anybody out there that wants to ask a question, feel free, jump in at any point. But again, what is weakness? Have you ever stopped and asked yourself that? What does the concept of weakness mean to me? What do I believe about weakness? Remember we talked about conditioning? What have I been conditioned to believe about weakness? What have I been conditioned to feel about myself feeling weak? Bad. Don't show weakness. Hold it in. And the more we hold in things as a society, the more we're afraid to talk about our fears, the more we fear weakness, the more it's not going to be talked about. And we're going to continue to see what happened in Oregon and happened in Sandy Hook and Columbine and all these places. It's going to keep happening. Why? Because kids are learning the amount of social media. And I mean, there was a story here in Florida a few weeks ago of a young girl who climbed on top of a water tower and killed herself because she was being bullied. Yes, that's my dog right there. See her? Anyway, and she killed herself. Why? Because she was being bullied. She was afraid of what people were thinking. And instead of talking it out or having a society where you could openly go talk about how you're feeling, what did she do? She kept it inside. And so all I'm asking is people who are watching this on YouTube or people who are still watching this now, talk to people around you. Don't be afraid. Talk to your kids, talk to your husband, talk to your wife, talk to them about what you're feeling, talk to them about what you're afraid of. Get some help. Talk to someone like me. Talk to a counselor. Reach out for help. Use your healthcare benefits to find somebody to talk some things out. If your marriage, if your job, if you're struggling with a lot of self-hate, and we're going to do another seminar on self-hate, because I'll tell you what, one of the most destructive things I see affecting good people is hating themselves. We hate ourselves for this. We have 1,000,001 regrets. We feel as though, oh my God, I've messed up my life. It's never gonna, and so what happens? We don't talk about it, and it gets worse and worse and worse. And all I'm asking you is to please begin the process of becoming aware of what you're thinking and feeling. Become aware of how you're feeling. Do not suffer in silence. Do not let fear, false evidence appearing real. Do not let the false evidence tell you that there's something wrong with you for having weakness. Everybody is weak. Everybody has insecurity. And we're going to be doing another seminar. I know I keep saying we're going to do a lot more. But we're going to do a seminar on insecurity, how to deal with insecurity. And this is just the first of the seminars on fear. This doesn't end here. I'm going to start breaking down ways to deal with fear. But what I'm encouraging you to think about is the reason a lot of the self-help books don't work, and the reason the seminars and these public speakers who make you believe it's so easy to change and so easy, the reason a lot of that doesn't last is because it's missing one vital component: talking out how you're feeling, talking it out. One of my websites is talkthingsout.com. Send me an email. We can set up a session. I can try to see if I can find someone in your area. But don't let this mental health stigma, this fear of mental health, this fear of being perceived as weak or being perceived as bad or whatever, don't let this affect your ability to feel able to work on your issues. Everybody has issues. Everybody. Fear has a way of making us assume the worst. Oh man, I'm the only one on the planet who is so afraid. I'm the only one who's insecure. Oh, nobody else struggles like me. I'm so pathetic. Trust me, we're going to do some sessions on self-talk and how self-talk and how we relate to ourselves is one of the most either destructive or constructive ways to be successful. So again, thank you for listening to this webinar. Those of you who tried to log on and weren't able to, I'm going to try to find out so we can work out what the problems are. Those of you who listened, I'm going to give a few more minutes. If you have any questions or comments, you can ask me a question. But again, I just want to leave you with a poem about fear. And I'm not going to say it perfectly because I don't really know it, but basically the idea is through my veil of fear, what I perceived as demons out to get me were angels sent to help me. And that's what fear does. Fear puts a veil in front of us that we look through. Like if these glasses, and yes, these are real, I need them for reading, but if these glasses were green, if they had green lenses in front of them, how would the whole world look to me? It would look green. And that's what fear does. Fear colors our perception so that we're afraid of this. We're afraid of that. Oh, I'm never going to get this. I'm never going to get that. So we really got to begin chipping away at those conditioned fears. So really quick to recap. Conditioning. How was I conditioned to look at fear? What do I believe about fear? Remember the ABCs of thinking. Activating event, belief, consequence. I get activated by something. I start believing something about the activating event, and those beliefs have consequences in the form of feelings. How the ABCs at work in my life. And then disputing the conditioning, being mindful of what I'm feeling and thinking. Okay? So I look forward to talking to you guys again. Those of you who couldn't log on, I apologize. I don't know what's going on. I will find out, try to get everything worked out. So look forward to talking with you again. This is Dr. Stephen Walker. You can send me an email at licensed.com. It's my website. You can ask me questions. I have a Facebook page. I think we have close to 40,000 followers on there now. So feel free to interact with me if something's going on. We can talk some more. But again, last thing, question the fear about talking about what's on your mind. Question that, because I'm not trying to blame anybody, but we are all complicit in what happens in things like Sandy Hook and in Oregon. The more we stigmatize talking about what's in our mind, we are as guilty as the people who are perpetrating the crime, because we are not exemplifying the process of talking things out. So let's challenge that fear. Let's keep working on ourselves. And again, thank you for listening to this, and I'll post some more times for follow-ups and some other seminars or webinars, okay? Good to talk with you. Thanks for the time, and we'll talk soon. Take care.